Hello, everyone. Welcome to Contact Lost. And this is yet another episode of the Road to LGT, where we interview 40K pros and celebrities who will most likely be attending the event. Today, well, you've seen the title of the episode already, but still, we have another guest without whom the series probably would seem incomplete. And I'm talking about the captain of this gigantic ship, the brains behind this impossible endeavor, Mr. Zac Addington. Aye, aye, Captain.
That's one of the better introductions I've had before. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I thought we were going to start with something original since you've done those interviews before, but this time you're here to talk about your baby. Basically, you're here to talk about the event that you are pulling off. It's, I think, very ambitious, and it's supposed to be very big, if not the biggest that you have done so far. So tell us all about it. I mean, what first of all, what makes someone want to run an event for 1,000 people? What does it take to actually organize an event like that?
Yeah, so there's a few questions in there to unpack, but what does it take, and why does somebody want to do it? I mean, probably a little bit of psychosis or something gone wrong in my brain. No, I mean, what I've said this many times on previous shows. Why I wanted to do it, we set it up in the first place because we wanted it to exist as a gamer. I wanted it to exist so I could win it, and unfortunately, it's got to such a scale where it's never going to be possible for me to play. But um, the main reason it's at the scale it is now is fundamentally it's a competition. When I first met Reese and Frankie in 2015, I think it was, I had a very drunken night out with them both, and I had a bet with Frankie that we would be the first event to ever hit 1,000 players. He obviously thought the LVO was, and the rest is history. So yeah, this year we are at 720 odd registrations, which is just shy of the LVO record, which is, I believe, 740. So I think we're like 30 or 40 off their record for registrations. Obviously, that's slightly below sales because obviously lots of people buy tickets and then can't come. But so we're so close, like 5% off the being the biggest in history, which is a shame, but it obviously gives us room to grow in the future. So that's basically like where we are at the moment. In terms of
Right.
like what goes into organizing it, well, if you were going to do it once as a one-off, then it's a mammoth task. But obviously, every year we build on the previous year, so it's never quite as much work as it would be if we were going to start from scratch and go straight to the scale.
So is there, I mean, a drunken bet, there's nothing better than a drunken bet as a foundation for, that sort of endeavor. But is there any sort of, would you say, any sort of competition between you and Frankie and Reese and Frontline Gaming in general to organize the biggest event?
Competition is a funny word because it's in business, it can mean two companies competing for the same customers, or it can mean between friends, a bit of friendly rivalry. I would very much put ourselves in the second category because we have so few of our attendees coming from the States and relatively few Brits going over to the LVO. So I don't think we're in competition in that sense. Also, Frontline Gaming is a much bigger, broader endeavor than just the event side of things. So I think it's much more of a friendly joke than anything to take seriously.
But still, a joke that went a little bit far. And, fingers crossed that it develops even more because what you're doing is absolutely amazing. So the amount of people, the amount of effort that goes into it, can you tell us a little bit about the preparations themselves? Like, how long does it actually take to pull off an event like that? For how long have you already been preparing?
Yeah, so I mean that's a really good question because obviously the majority of your listeners will be 40K players tuning in to find out about the details about that side of the event, which I'm sure we'll get to. But to take the convention overall, it's 40K is less than half of the overall attendees. So all day today and for the entirety of the bank holiday weekend, we obviously just had a day off work before the Queen's funeral. But I've been building Kings of War terrain. Now, it's probably oblivious to most of our 40K players, but we also have the biggest Kings of War event in the world. at the LGT. So, and for that, we've done the same thing we've done for 40K, where we've standardized all the tables, and we've partnered with a high quality terrain manufacturer. So we have to build out all of that. And that's true for, the majority of the events across the convention. So just from a purely practical side of things, you've got all of that, like manual labor, let's call it, that side of things. From an organizational perspective, obviously there's one venue, so there's one contract, and the commercial side of organizing the event is the same whether there's just 40K there or 20 events there. But project management that goes on around organizing the TOs, making sure they all hit the deadlines for their packs, making sure they're on target for promotion, making sure that the hotels are booked under the right names and people know where they're going at the right times, and all of the really core project management stuff takes a vast amount of work. So I would say typically on an annual basis, where we grow at what we think is basically like a normal amount, which is 10 to 20% a year now, it takes about 400 hours a year. So that's basically equivalent of two months full-time work.
Right.
But if we were starting from scratch, it's at least 6 months. Just to build the terrain for the 40K event alone. I think I worked it out once. It was something like 400 man days. So that's if you have 4 people working full time, that's 100 days of 4 people working full time.
That's
just building
insane.
the terrain. Yeah. So
yes, Go on.
So it's that side of things, and then there's a second sort of layer of the work, which is a risk management side of the project. It's what can I do extra now that decreases the risks that something will go wrong on the weekend of the event itself. And this comes down to like making sure things are organized in advance, so when they get to the event, you don't have to look through a bunch of things to make sure somebody has them. So you're taking out time risk, and this all goes on behind the scenes, and obviously the attendees turn up and they go to their tables. But the way we're able to make it that a seamless process is by doing all of this additional stuff. So I will be sorting out mats in 2 days to make sure that the right ones are with the right boxes of terrain and on the right pallets and all that sort of stuff.
And all that still while having events happening, well, maybe not weekly, but pretty frequently. So all that happens in the background. How big is the team? Like the team that you have, running this with you?
So the LGT itself is something about 20 events across something like 14 game systems. Typically, each game system will have at least 2 people running it, maybe 3. So that's already basically 60 people. Then from the logistical side of things, I've got 14, so that's 74. Then 40K reffing staff is 6, plus myself, so that's 82. Bar staff is another 4.5, because we have one person that switches between. So that's 86. So I would say somewhere between 75 and 100 will be the total number of people working on the event over the course of the weekend itself.
That is some proper project management, to be perfectly honest. This is really something huge to coordinate all this in time, within budget, etc., etc. That is insane. So let's focus on the LGT. It will be comprised of 2 events. We're talking about the 40K, 2 events. So the invitational and the main event. What was the driver behind organizing the invitational? Is it always there during every LGT? What made you choose the players that are in the invitational this time?
Sure. So just to clarify, there's actually a bunch more than 2 events for 40K. We've got obviously the narrative, the RTTs, the doubles, the main event, and the invitational. So if anyone's listening to this in the doubles, we haven't forgotten you. But yeah, so the two main competitive events are the invitational and the GT. Now, obviously, the GT is the grand event. It's the one that really is the point of the whole thing. The invitational is slightly different in what it's trying to achieve. So we run 2 invitational events a year. We've got the Unconquerable one that happens just before the LGT, which is for the best players in the country. So if you go undefeated at one of our events, you get an invite to that. Then the LGT Invitational, which is a bit different. I try to think of it more as a showcase of competitive 40K. And I don't mean the best play, I mean compared to 40k in its entirety. So that includes content creators, it includes regulars on the scene that have been around forever. It includes the top players at the moment, it includes previous top players that maybe have fallen off the boil a little bit. So it's a real mix. It's meant to be a representative sample of what this community is. So we try to mix and match who goes in for what purposes. So obviously we have people like Vic VJ gets an invite because he's one of the top players in the world. Simultaneously, we have people like Andrew Weller, who runs 40 hours of 40k and raises tens of thousands of pounds for charity. I'm not sure he's ever won a game of 40k, but he's a lovely guy. He's active in the community, and we like to have him involved in the event to showcase what he's doing for the community generally. So they're like two ends of the spectrum, and then we fill it up in between that with a variety of these different people. So we've obviously got James from Goomhammer, we've got Manny from Glasshammer, we've got a couple of international players. So there is two under the radar 40k geniuses coming, one from Germany, one from Poland, who may have small you can tell I'm tired. I'm so tongue-tied.
Yeah, I think everyone will forgive you that.
You know, it's like we can give these guys a platform to beat some of the quote-unquote top players in the world, where in their home communities there may not be as much ITC representation, so there's not that sort of prestige that comes with being top of the ITC, but they are still players of the top caliber.
Correct. So the seeding for the invitational event is done. I think it was done yesterday and published yesterday. So to those who don't follow exactly and might not know what the pairing process for that invitational event looks like, can you, shed some light on that? How did that go about?
Yeah, so the invitational, as I just said, it's meant to be this showcase, but it's meant to be part of the overall LGT experience. So we like to get as many people that have come into the LGT or part of the LGT community involved. So we run a seeding every year where people can vote on where they think the nominated players are going to be. So whether they're going to be first seeded or 16th, because this year we have 16. This year we've then averaged that across the ITC seeding. So if you're top of the ITC, you'd be ranked 1. If you're ranked 10,000th in the ITC, you'd probably be 16th. And then we average that across. So if they're seeded first in ITC and say third in the player, the public seeding, then they would be average seeded second. That's the highest score. Then they would be seeded first overall. So it's a little convoluted when I say it like that, but it's super simple maths. And then it's just a championship bracket. So seed 1 plays seed 16 in game 1, seed 2 plays seed 15 in game 1. The idea being that if the seeding is an accurate representation and everyone performs as they're predicted to, then you should get seed 1 versus seed 2 in the finale. Now, as we know from anyone who's a tennis fan, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you get Roger Federer playing Nadal in the semi-finals because the seeding isn't quite as accurate as people would like it to be. But it's just a broader part of the sort of community engagement that we like to do in the month before the LGT each year.
Okay, so to those of our listeners who don't follow Warhammer tournaments on Facebook, please go and visit, because Zac has put in some effort into highlighting the player profiles over there. We are obviously trying to interview as many people who will be attending the tournament as possible, but still all of the player profiles are there. So if any of the names doesn't really sound familiar, you might want to read up on them. There is a short note about every single one of them. You can choose your favorite and then root for them. So that's the invitational. Does the invitational do the invitational and the GT follow the same rules packs, or are there any differences between them?
So in terms of missions and all that stuff, they're exactly the same. The key difference is the format. So obviously pairings, as I've just described, is completely different from the main event, because the main event it's not seeded at all. It's random and then follows wins and then random. So but the main other difference is that it's a knockout format. So you've got to keep winning to keep playing. The idea being that by the time we get to the final of the Invitational, which will be 2 players out of the 16, there's only 1 game going on, so we can make it more of a spectacle. We can the final happens on Saturday night after the daytime gaming, so anyone that's finished game 3 and wants to hang around to watch it, they can watch it. And it means because there's only 1 game going on, we can do a lot more media coverage about that specific game during the event itself.
Right. So if we wanted to go a little bit into the numbers around the main event. So you said how many players are there now? 720?
Yeah, I think we had 7, 13 or 14 registered on time. Obviously, the number goes up and down because people will register and then something will come up and they won't be able to come. There'll be other people that hold tickets, but for whatever reason didn't register on time, so we register them manually. So my day at the moment, my life for this week is basically 2 hours of doing that every morning, 2 hours of doing that every evening, building terrain in between. Yeah, so I expect the final number of people in BCP, so people that have successfully registered, to be around 720. And that makes it by far the biggest LGT ever. And like I said earlier, just less than 5% off the biggest 40K tournament in history.
Right. And as you mentioned, there are going to be players not only in the Invitational, but also in the GT, players coming from all around the world. So how many nationalities have you counted so far?
When I did a quick overview about a week and a bit ago, I think we had 33 nations represented at the LGT in total, which is staggering. And from all over the place. Obviously, that was one of the things that I love most about Warhammer, is that you can use it as a mechanism to see the world, make new friends, and travel to new places. I myself have been to, obviously, LVO, Nova, all over the place. I'm going to a tournament in Mexico. There's the Mexican national tournament in November for anyone who wants to go. So it's really fantastic for me as an individual to see that this thing that I've created is helping people to come see London and see the UK and make lots of new friends in the process.
Yeah, and we as the let's call it the media support, we will be enjoying that as well. So maybe let's focus on that for just a moment. So the people from Poland that I speak to in our Polish Discord have been asking me whether there's going to be a stream. And I told them not exactly. This is not what Zac is going for. So what are you going for?
Yeah, so I don't like streams in so much as if you have, say, keeping the math simple, 350 games going on, rounds 1 through 5. Even in round 5, where you're supposed to be having like only winners playing winners, there's still 60-something, I think, games going on that could potentially have relevance to whoever's going to win the actual finale. So it's not particularly interesting to see 3 hours of people's hands moving models around. The people who I believe do this the best in the world are War Games Live. They do a lot of the events in the States. They have lots of cameras like in the table zooming in on the models themselves. But ultimately, 40K is not the best spectator sport. What's different about the massive events like the LVO and the LGT is we have such a large number of games going on at the same time that you can still fill a 3-hour block, but instead of it being 3 hours off the back of people's heads while they're moving models around, you can be 3 hours of giving you live updates throughout the field. It can be 3 hours of talking drama about this surprise upset that happened when so-and-so got knocked out by average person that no one had ever heard of before. So, this, for those of us that remember, it was one of the LVOs, I think 2017, Nick Nanavati got knocked out in round 1 by a person who'd never been to a tournament before. So we're going to add in some interviews as well as doing this coverage. So the idea is that it becomes much more of a sporting production rather than a chess tournament being live streamed, in so much as the coverage will be aimed at telling people who aren't there what's happening and giving people who have done something cool, whether it's they've got an amazing army that's up for best painted, whether they've just knocked Manichima out in round 2 after killing 170 racks.
Poor Manny.
Yeah, exactly. Or whatever it is, we can interview those people, hear their stories. It's the same reason everyone likes, well, not everyone, but it's the same reason Pop Idol and American Idol are popular TV shows. It's because the stories behind the characters. So the goal will be to tell that side of the player experience while still providing the information that everyone wants, which is who's doing well, what are they doing well with. You know, people like the stats and the armies that want to know what's going to be the new meta next weekend. And then when we get down to what is actually a reasonable amount of games to cover fully, for example, the semi-finals, the final of the Invitational, like I mentioned earlier, obviously we have the finals day this year, so we'll have 8 players and then 4 and then 2. Then you can actually cover a game with enough history. You've got 9 games will have come before the final, where you can talk about this game in a way that actually makes it engaging to watch the full 3 hours of. I don't think that in round 1 live streaming, whoever Malik happens to be playing will be interesting TV for anyone. So that's really my goal. My goal is to create informative, interesting TV that explains the story behind the player experience. That would be the best way I could try to sum it up.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take, and Contact Us will be, our crew will be excited to help you with that. There's always that issue with streams, especially should you put mics on the players? Will the players handle actually using the mics? That adds another level of pressure, another level of complication. So it does sound like a reasonable approach, and we'll do our best to help with that. So. The GT is part of like a bigger circuit, the UKTC, which is like an equivalent of ITC overseas. Is there anything specific to the UKTC about the rules or the terrain that is used that players coming to an event like that for the first time should realize?
Yes, I guess that's a good question, because the answer is there's a lot. Now I think I probably take it for granted that everyone knows what to expect, because so many of our attendees are return customers. They come back to as many events as possible. But one thing that's been very clear from the amount of email traffic I've been managing this week is just how many first-time attendees we have at this LGT, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, like, it comes sort of it's a major point for me that the Games Workshop slogan, more Warhammer, more often, is not just a platitude. It's really the goal, and not just for them, but it should be the goal for all third-party businesses, whether they're content creators, tournament organizers, local gaming stores. What we really want is we want to share the hobby that we love with as many people as possible, and then engage in it as much as we can. So for me to see so many first-time attendees is fantastic. So there's quite a lot of like preliminary information that people may not be aware of if they're not a regular attendee. To start with, obviously we standardize all the terrain. Now, those that have read our packs properly, which I know is a rarity, but anyone that reads the packs obviously knows this. And that gives the players the information they need to practice. And it really informs certain list archetype decisions. So anyone that's been listening to Vic, VJ, and David Gaylord's new podcast will listen to them talk about how, when building lists, it's very specific to what terrain they're going to be playing on. Entire list builds won't work in certain terrain formats. So that's one side of things. The other side of things is that anyone that comes to any of my events know is we're never late. Everything always starts on time, and we have policies in place for every eventuality. Is your opponent not there on time? What do you do? If you haven't submitted your score and you've wandered off to get lunch, what happens next? So we've got policies for all of these things. So anyone that's listening that doesn't know, if your opponent's not at your table when you get there to the start of your round, wait 10 minutes, and then there'll be an announcement. You come see the judge, we'll get you repaired. When the game's over, you've got 15 minutes to submit your scores. Better get it in on time. Otherwise, when we call your name and if your score's not in, you get a 0. So these are the main things, because we can't have 700 people waiting for the next round to start that's being delayed because one person's gone off to get lunch without submitting their scores. So we've been through all of these teething issues at different events previously, and as a result have a very strict set of policies that enable us to manage these events like clockwork.
Right, and then you have like the whole a bunch of referees roaming around the event, also, ready to help players and so on. How is that organized? I mean, and is
Yeah.
it very common to call referees to your table, or is it like Ines Wilson claims there is a certain stigma against calling a referee to your table? Do you encourage it, or are they just there to basically like interpreters during a conference, for example? They are there, but they should be invisible.
No, actually, they serve a multitude of roles at an event like the LGT, because we have such a variety of players there. As I said, many first-time tournament attendees. So there is a certain amount of referee/teaching role for some players who may not be as well versed with the rules as others. For them, I'm obviously absolutely call a ref if you don't know how the rules work, call a ref and they'll help you. And then obviously at the complete other end of the spectrum, we have, this is the most important competitive event of the calendar. So if you need a ref at your table because you're going to lose a game, because you might be a millimeter in or a millimeter out, call a ref. That's what they're there for. We spend a vast amount of money to fly best refs in the world across Europe, put them up in hotels. It's an expensive addition to the tournament that the ticket price has been inflated to pay for. So use them, otherwise they're going to be bored. So I just want, obviously you've had Pumba and Typhus on before, but lots of the time they don't have anything to do. So I tell everyone, it's like, use them because that's what they're there for. While we're talking about that, we should talk about how the LGT is different from a normal event. So obviously we can scale up and down the number of refs we have based on the number of people we have. But one thing that makes the LGT different, even though we've scaled up the number of refs, is the sheer distances involved. So the hall itself at the LGT is 130 meters long. If a ref's at one end of the hall and he needs to get to your table and you're at the other end of the hall, it's going to take 2 minutes. And that's if he's walking fast. So we have an entirely different way of calling refs at the LGT that I'll quickly take anyone through that's listening.
Absolutely do. Mm-hmm.
So the first port of call is, can you see a ref in your immediate vicinity? They're all wearing high-vis vests, so if you can see one that's walking right past your table, you can go grab them. Second side of it, which it makes it much more efficient, is we have a remote ref system. So this is built on what we did last year, and we've improved it slightly based on some of the feedback we got. So if you have a basic rules query, something that you're not sure about but doesn't require any discretion, it's just I'm charging through this, and this. How does it work? Or one of these common questions. I've got the fly keyword and I'm charging through dangerous, difficult ground. Am I -2 to my charge? Something like this. You can WhatsApp this to a number that all attendees were provided, and if it's a basic rules question, you'll immediately get a response from one of the referees. We have a dedicated referee that just sits on a computer all day with all the rules in front of him answering these queries. If a judgment call is required to solve the issue that the ref's being called for, he then messages the ref who's responsible for that group of tables, and that ref then goes to that table. So it saves the player having to walk off to go find the referee. And so this saves time in 2 ways. One, it means that referees aren't called to a table, which involves all that walking just to answer a basic question. And it means that they get called to the tables when they're actually needed in a much more expedient fashion. And the second side of that obviously goes as well for any sort of sportsmanship issues if you need a ref for non-rules related stuff. So we've really tried to look at the downtime that the refs have when they're not doing quote unquote referee stuff, and try to minimize that through using technology in a practical way.
Right, and to all our listeners, we did an episode on refereeing at the LGT with Pumba and Typhus. I think 2 episodes ago. If you haven't heard that, please go and listen to it, because they give a lot more information about how to use the system, what is necessary, and whether they are reliable or not. But they've been a guest at our podcast many a time. You probably will find their faces and names familiar. So go have a listen. It's a real joy to listen, and it will be a real joy to cooperate with them. Alongside with them, they are bringing Dave, also a Polish referee who is basically a referee to the WTC, and their best friend Everett, as far as I know, who is on the same skill level as Dave. So it's a really capable, really matter-of-fact group of people that you are going to be dealing with and relying on. So that is definitely covered. Now, moving on to another very common and down-to-earth issue, but still something that people will be interested in. Will there be any food at the LGT?
Will there be food?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
so
it's a long run, and you need gas to be able to
yeah.
actually handle it. So, have you put any effort into this year?
Yeah, so this has actually been my main focus this year. It's
Good.
something I've said many times on different podcasts, but if something goes wrong one year, I try to make it the best thing about the following year. Food has been a perennial issue for us. It's fundamentally just very, very hard to feed over 1,000 people in an hour. And with that being said, people should still expect queues. There's no way we're going to ever have a system without queues. But what we've done this year is we've completely changed caterers. We've gone with a management company rather than a catering company, and the management company procures high-end street food vans, variety of cuisines to come and cater for the event. They work with these vans throughout the country and throughout the year at different venues. They have some of their permanent food markets that they work with these people in, and at other times they procure them for other events, and whether it's a VIP party. They've done some of our events before, so anyone that came to Newcastle had some of the gourmet hot dogs or the pizzas. Anyone that came to Bristol obviously had the famous Korean fried chicken, which people have been going nuts about. And these were all tasters of things to come for the LGT. So the goal at the LGT is to have minimum of 5. We're hoping to get 7 of these different vans. There'll be different cuisines, different cool sort of hipster style street food market options, and they'll be open all day. So don't feel the need to wait until you're hungry, or don't feel the need to wait until lunchtime. If you're hungry, go early. And then of course we have our craft beer bar. This has become a bit of a signature of our events. I've worked the bar at many of our events, and all of our regular attendees will be familiar with California. California is our house brew, if you like. It's a California style pale ale, and we get this provided by a company called Gouda, which is good with an H on the end, which are a Cornish microbrewery, and they provide all our beer. So we've got California Pale Ale, we've got Restoration IPA, which is a nice low percent IPA. You can drink it all day without getting drunk or too drunk, or have it a hair of the dog in the morning. And then a bunch of others. I think we've got something like 8 or 9 different craft beers on tap this year. And I really recommend people go support Gouda. They're incidentally owned by the same people that own TT Combat, who are the makers of our terrain. So they are a wargaming company, even though they're
one big
also a
family.
beer company. Yeah, so
That's amazing.
So we'll have a lot of food, and hopefully it will be as quickly served as possible this year.
So does that mean that people, can just leave their boxed food at home, their bottle of or Biden's at home, and not bring anything because everything will be there? Or do you still encourage people to, bring anything to the event?
Well, it's a licensed venue, so bringing any of your own alcohol is a no-no. That will get confiscated and you'll be asked to leave. So there's free water, so don't feel the need to bring water with you. If you want to, of course, can, but there's free tap water, and we have bottled water. The caterers
most importantly for me, will there be coffee?
There is coffee, yeah. So
yes.
The bar has instant coffee and tea, and then we have a separate barista van who's doing espresso based coffees. So he'll be there. And the main thing really is we want our attendees to have an amazing time. We we've put a lot of effort into trying to make the catering as good as possible to cater for what our attendees need in order to have a successful weekend. And part of that is about specialty diets. So we have vegan options, we have gluten-free options. Hopefully we've got options for everyone, but we're not going to be telling people you can't bring, I don't know, your jammy Dodgers.
Of course.
So we basically say, you know, if you want to bring food, you can, but you're already carrying an army around. Why do you want to carry a packed lunch too when you can go get a Venezuelan arepa or some Korean fried chicken or Italian stone-baked pizza? Like, if you really want to bring a cheese and onion sandwich, bring a cheese and onion sandwich, but why not have some more fun? And, you know, you spent all this money to come to a big tournament, stay in a hotel and travel and the ticket, like, spend a couple of quid and have something nice in your belly while you're playing 40k.
Yeah, that's really well said. So, you know, I'm still trying to, because we've covered food, we've covered drinks. I'm trying to figure out any other logistic aspects of an event like that. If you know, an event of that gravitas that people might need to remember about. And the first thing that comes to my mind after covering food and drinks would be charging your phone and so on. Is that a possibility over there, or do I need to bring a power bank?
No, well, bring a power pack if you want to. Obviously, I generally don't go anywhere without mine anyway. But we do have a charging station. The charging station can charge up to 30 devices at one time. That we have roller banners for everything. So find a roller banner that says charging station in massive writing. You can put your phone on charge there. We've got USB-C, USB micro, and iPhone cables. Obviously, we don't take any responsibility for anyone's devices, but if you need some juice, you can leave it there. That's something that, you know, people always wanted. Now we've got the equipment, we might as well take it. So we take that to all our events. While we're talking about like pure practical stuff, you haven't mentioned toilets yet, which is and car parking.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah. So these are the things. My auntie once, she's a very wise woman. She told me, she said, all the people care about clean toilets and easy car parking. So we have obviously the main toilets in the venue, so they're under the grandstands. Anyone that comes will be able to find those. And then once been before, we'll obviously know where they are. There are additional toilets, so anyone that's listening that wants to use the bathroom and they see a queue, there's 8 extra toilets outside. So head outside. There's 8 extra toilets that we're renting and we're bringing in. Car parking, we've got something like 800 spaces, and we're next to 2 train stations, and we have overflow if we really need it. So long as every single person doesn't come in a car by themselves, there should be parking on site for everyone. And then
there is one more thing that comes to mind, and this is my own personal question, just because when I go to events where you know, I have to think hard for a long time and there are stressful situations and so on, it can happen that I get a nasty migraine and so on. Do you have any sort of medical stuff around that, you know, you can get maybe an aspirin from, or do I bring my own?
Yeah, so obviously we don't just have aspirin to hand out. We don't want to be responsible for giving people medication.
Of course.
But we do have multiple health and safety personnel on site. So if anyone does need medical attention, obviously immediately get in touch because we're here to help.
That's great.
If it's basic first aid stuff, or somebody just, you know, we have lots of people that just get overwhelmed. They have anxiety issues or something like that. We can obviously facilitate quiet spaces and all that sort of thing if people really need them. But yeah, for sure, any health and safety matters, they trump everything. So if you've got any issues at all, come see any of the members of staff in high-vis jackets, and we'll help you straight away.
Yeah. So also make sure you listen to yet another one of our episodes, this time with Ines Wilson, because he goes into great detail on how you should prepare for the event, what you should bring and what you should think about. And yeah, remember about your own medication. I mean, you know, it's a no-brainer, but it sometimes happens that you get that migraine, and if you don't bring your aspirin, it might be a hard day for you and for your opponents. The next question, it might be a little bit lazy, but since you are the guy who manages all the communication around the event and you read all the emails that you get from participants and so on, what would be the most frequently asked questions that we might want to touch upon?
Well, we're close to the event, so the types of questions I get have changed throughout the sort of event cycle, depending on where we are. A lot of the questions that I would have got this time last week prior to list submission are about conversions, proxies, paint schemes. Like I said to anyone that ever asks me, we don't improve any of these on a case-by-case basis. We have a very well thought out policy that applies to nearly every single circumstance. And it's not fair for us to make judgment calls on literally thousands of different models that we get every event asked us. So if you have a conversion, proxy, vintage model, partially assembled model, paint scheme, anything that's remotely non-standard, there's a policy in our pack for you. It's your job to make sure that your modeling, your hobby side of your experience doesn't negatively impact anyone else's experience. We don't expect everyone to be a heavy metal painter, but we do expect a modest amount of courtesy in terms of how you present your armies for your fellow attendees. So if anyone has got a query that relates to that side of things, you want to check out the policies and procedures pack. That's linked to on the website. That's probably the main question I get prior to list sub. Obviously, list sub has just happened, so anyone thinking about emailing in and asking me if they can change their list, the answer is no. You cannot willfully change your list unless there's massively extenuating circumstances, and typically this comes with a heavy points penalty. So obviously, if somebody's army gets stolen on a plane and then they arrive without an army and they need to change faction because their buddy can lend them something, we can make accommodations for those sorts of extenuating circumstances. But if you want to change your war gear on your crisis suit commander, lists are public. No, you cannot make any changes that might be optimizations. So that's a common question I get right now.
Okay.
But realistically, I mean, all of these things are common sense to anyone that goes to events. But mainly, I'm thinking about people that don't come to events, people that haven't had much experience in terms of like what things that were flexible and what things that aren't. So there's a variety of different policies in there to try to explain how we manage our events. It's quite a generic pack in so much as another TO with a different set of missions and a different set of terrain could pick up our policies and procedures pack and say, all right, how do we handle this guy that's asked us who wants to bring his old metal harlequins? Let's go find the policy for vintage models, and then there's a whole paragraph specifically about how those are handled.
Right.
So I encourage everyone to read that. That sits underneath the tournament pack, which tailors the policies and procedures for the specifics of the event itself. So in this case, the LGT main event. And those two, in combination with the terrain emissions pack, are basically the three chapters of the Bible for my events.
Right. For people who are curious, obviously the lists have been published already. Where can people see them?
So anyone can see lists on BCP if they have an account. That's not up to me, that's up to BCP. Mm-hmm. If you don't have an account, you should be able to see any of the LGT lists that are marked sponsor. Obviously, BCP, we're the second biggest event in the world. We push a large amount of traffic to BCP, so they sponsor a bunch of our events, quote unquote, by letting people see the lists for those ones. Obviously, a lot of people in this audience will either be going to the event or will have a friend going, so there's access through their player apps directly as well. So if they go into their player app, they can access the lists that way. We'll also be doing a bunch of previews. So today I previewed David Gaillard's Tyranids list, which is kind of his final form of Tyranids pre-Vortan. So he's been working on this list now since the Leviathan, the Crusher Stampede came out. So it's almost a year in the making. Obviously one of the top players in the world. So his list was previewed today on our Facebook, as was his teammate Vic VJ's. Really interesting Empress Children's list. So if you follow along on the London Grand Tournament Facebook page, or previewing some of the lists there as well.
And coincidentally, we are interviewing David and Vic on Thursday. So expect an episode on that either on Thursday evening or on Friday, because I'll do everything to release it as soon as possible. Okay, Zac, any final advice for people who are coming maybe for the first time? Definitely they should try and have great fun, but anything else that comes to your mind, from your experience with previous events, anything
Sure.
that people should remember?
Yeah, so a couple of things. In the tournament packs for each event, whether it's an RTT or the main event, there are round timings. The round timings tell you when the doors open. Please don't arrive before the doors open. Having extra people walking around while we're moving heavy equipment is dangerous, and the reason we have a restricted opening period is to make sure that we can get everything set up on time for you guys. So that's number one. Number two is, do please arrive on time. It takes a vast amount of effort to repair everyone if you're late, so we give everyone a 30-minute time slot to arrive. Try to get there on time. A large number of people, 160 odd people, bought VIP tickets. If you are a VIP ticket holder, come to the merch stand. We have absolutely amazing swag for you that is going to basically pay back your ticket and a bit extra. So make sure you come see the merch stand. If you have a VIP ticket, all you need is your name and your order number. For anyone that doesn't have a VIP ticket but does want to buy some merch, there will be a big merch stand next to the judges' desks. We have, in my opinion, the best event dice ever made. They are casino grade 20mm resin dice with our logo on. They're absolutely badass, as well as a bunch of other cool stuff. Regular attendees at the LGT will obviously already know about our raffle. We do an awesome raffle every year, giving away literally thousands of pounds worth of prizes. So come check out the raffle. And then something new that we've added this year that's a bit of fun. We have 3 sort of carnival 40k themed games. We've got a Nerf bolt gun, so it's a 3D printed bolt gun that fires Nerf bullets. They can shoot some more orc targets down. We've got a Nurgling toss where there's a board with a bunch of holes in, you throw the Nurgling through it. We've got a speed painting competition. We've got a bits box competition. There's lots more to do aside from just playing 40k, so make sure you come check out all of that stuff. And I think that's probably it.
So where can people go and look for the information about the event, like the latest updates, announcements, and so on? Which websites would you recommend?
Yeah, so if you are not coming but you're interested in the event, the best thing to do is follow our Facebook. You can also sign up to our mailing list via the lgtpresents.co.uk website or the warhammer-tournaments.com website. If you are coming to the event, the number one place you need to be checking is your inbox. All of the vital information is always emailed out. I'm absolutely swamped with people saying I don't get the emails. We send the emails out. It's all done automatically to the email addresses that people bought their tickets up with. So if you put a typo in that email address, that's why they're not coming to you. If they're going in your spam, they're not coming to you, but they are automatically sent to everyone. I'm not picking and choosing who I don't want to send them to. So yeah, if you're an attendee, make sure you're following your emails. If you're generally interested in the event, want to find out more, our website is lgtpresents.co.uk, and the UK tournament circuit is based out of warhammer-tournaments.com. And some exciting new stuff that we've been working on recently, just like we launched the UK tournament circuit, which is a independent ranking circuit just for the UK. We've recently been contacted by members of both the Icelandic and French communities who have asked us to administer a tournament circuit set of rankings for them too. This is basically effectively exactly the same thing that we are doing for the UK, but in those countries. So if anyone's listening out there in a country that's underrepresented in the world's stage of 40k and wants to get in touch about getting a circuit launched in their local area, head over to warhammertournaments.com and ping us an email, and we'll be able to help you out.
That's amazing. That's pretty cool. So I have one bonus question, and this is not about the event anymore. Well, maybe to an extent. So you are a player. Apart from organizing the events and running the company who does it, you are also a player. So both as a player and as an organizer of events, do you follow the meta, and do you believe that the meta affects how well the tournaments do and how well your company does? Or is there no relation between the two of those?
Yeah, this is a bonus question, but it's something I think very deeply about and track continually. So there's a few different data points that give me a numerical understanding of the health of the game. The meta is a sort of downstream version of what I consider to be the health of the game. So things like ticket uptake, so how quickly people buy tickets, total ticket sales, are the events selling out? What's the gross number of sales? Recidivism, how many people buy a ticket don't come, how many people buy tickets, bail on the day even though they registered, or bail halfway through the event. These are all different data points that indicate how excited people are for the game, both when the tickets are launched and then through the 6-month period we typically have tickets on sale for. We just ran Leeds in beginning of August, just after Niflheim dropped. We had the lowest ever no-show rate of any event we've ever run. I believe it was just under 2%. It was like 1.5% or something, which is unheard of. Typically large events, Leeds was 200 something players. Normally events like that size have a 10 to 20% no-show rate. So from that, I could tell that the community was very, very excited by the quote-unquote meta when Niflheim dropped. So that's a sort of long-winded way of saying, yes, I track these things. Do I believe the meta influences the events? Absolutely. Now, the player in me, I was a competitive player. I used to take what I thought would give me the best opportunity to win. I wanted to play on a. If you take your army as being the baseline, and then you're just competing on player skill and the variables of the game, the luck side of things, why would you deliberately handicap yourself if you're trying to win the overall thing? So I can understand why people are just trying to do the best they can with what they want to play with. That's one perspective. And then there's another perspective, which is taking what you think is going to win you the event. But to go back to Vic and David's comparison, they're both players that are going there with the express purpose of winning the event. And one is taking Tyranids that he's been playing for 8 months, and the other one is taking a brand new codex with a very niche list that most people don't think is top tier. So the health of the game at the moment, I think, is very, very good. There's been a lot of rumblings about Vortan and what's going to happen in the future, but right now I think the game is in a very healthy state. The LGT is very fortunate to be positioned after summer, so it's likely that next year will be the first large event of 10th edition. Obviously, we'll have to see what happens. If games keep up with their 3-year release schedule, then that will probably be the case. And there's always a big new edition buzz, and there's always a big end of edition lull. So if we can have 315 people come at the end of an edition lull, I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that magical 1,000 with the 10th edition boom that hopefully will come next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm already excited about that, and excited about the new edition, but also excited about the numbers that you were talking about. It seems like you put a lot of effort into that proper analysis of the market situation connected with the meta situation. I would be really thrilled, and I think our listeners as well, to find out more about it. So maybe when once the dust settles and the LGT is over, maybe we could invite you again and go through those numbers and see how the event went and how much thinking went into that. I think that would make for a very, very interesting episode. Any final thoughts? Anything else that I might have missed, or that you want to announce that our listeners potentially should know? Or do you think we can wrap it?
No, I think I'd just like to close by saying thank you to everyone that's listening. Hopefully a large number of you are coming to the event. I really, really hope you have a great time. I struggle through all the emails. I get to everyone eventually, and hopefully that will show in the quality of the event. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys all are too. And make sure you come along and have a good time. Anyone that's not coming this year, we hope to see you next year. It's always a thrill to meet new people.
That's great. Thank you, Zac. And to all our listeners, again, if you like what you hear or you like what to see from time to time, because we try to make video ones as well, do leave a like, do subscribe, do follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and other podcasting media, because we are trying to deliver the best kind of content, but your help is required for us to grow. We will be there at the LGT. We will be doing the coverage that Zac mentioned. So do come over, do say hi. We will be very happy to see you over there. With that in mind, thank you, Zac. Thank you, everyone. And until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.